Welcome to Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition.
where we talk about what's working, what's not, and what's next in legal work.
I'm Kelly Radnathy.
And I'm Christine Custodio Suero. Let's dive in. We talk a lot about preparing paralegals for the future of law, but preparation is not just about skills, it's about identity and agency and the ability to navigate change with intention. We're so fortunate to have one of our favorite guests, Whitney Harvey. She's an attorney, coach, and strategist focused on professional identity, resilience, and human centered career development in modern legal environments. Whitney brings a really unique lens at the intersection of coaching, legal practice, and even workforce evolution. So, welcome, Whitney. I'd love to
Thank you.
kind of start our conversation with this question. How would you define professional identity in today's landscape?
Hi, Christine. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Uh, Great question because professional identity is very complex. And I'd say that it really is about not just the task that you do, but the way that you approach your work. So, your values, your strengths, how you want to show up and contribute to your role as a professional. So, it goes beyond the doing and more so of your purpose in the work that you perform.
I really appreciate that. I'm currently in semester right now teaching, and I know you also teach business law at Arizona State University. So we are both very invested, as is Kelly, in the future legal workforce. Right? It's really something that we take very seriously. And I wonder, just for our colleagues in AAfPE, what does career agency look like for paralegals right now, from your lens?
Yeah, such a great question. So, career agency specifically for paralegals is focused on what I'm seeing on this sense of empowerment of how can I really start taking ownership of my own growth without waiting for permission or external validation, or sometimes even that sense that I have it all figured out. So, I'm going to proactively start managing my career on my own and seeking out it's this curiosity and seeking out opportunities for advancement and growth. So that's one of the primary things that I'm witnessing with paralegals. I'm also really seeing this embracing of technology, this embracing of legal operations, and being very heavily focused on how to make the design of the workplace more efficient, and more, uh, yeah, efficient. That's the best word. How to make it more efficient to reduce any bottlenecks, to reduce some of the frustrations that we see in the day to day functioning in the legal space.
Yeah, and I really appreciate how you frame that because Kelly and I like to say we are so tech forward, right? Not just tech enabled. We are tech forward people. And we really encourage our learners, our students, anyone in our sphere of influence to really embrace that, especially because we're at such a unique juncture right now, right? We have this technology, Gen AI specifically, that's iterating so quickly and evolving so quickly that, it's really having impacts on our workflows as legal professionals. And the way that Kelly and I like to say it is we're really moving from these like hunters, right, to like strategists. And we really encourage students to take that mindset and that approach to their work and having that kind of autonomy definitely is something that is important for them. Like I said, especially during this time that we find ourselves in, and moving from those kind of more task based roles into
Mhm.
these identity driven careers, almost as career architects. And as you know, we've co-written articles together, Kelly, you and myself, on professional identity, right? And it's something that we have identified, it's developed, right? And it's continuously iterating, and we refine that as we kind of learn and grow. And I know that Kelly and you really have a lot of content around wellness and self care. And I know that you also are in your PhD program and
Yeah.
exploring and doing research around flourishing, right? Especially for lawyers. And so
Yeah,
I would love to hear a little bit more about that because I think this is directly connected to professional identity.
absolutely. Yeah, what I've set to embark on with the PhD program was really me trying to make sense of my work life, my lived experience professionally. And it's kind of funny that I just sort of gravitated towards a narrative study that can look at the way that other women lawyers have made sense of their experiences. And so it's a full circle moment because I'm in real time trying to navigate this myself and also interviewing other women lawyers that are going to be doing the same thing. And so, the strategies for flourishing, I do feel like part of that sense making process, you don't need to be in a PhD program to do that. You can really make sense of your lived experience just by looking at your past, looking at things you've overcome, looking at the themes and the the themes and ways that you can weave a connection in between what's happened previously, where you are present, and where you want to go. And a lot of times I've found a sense of understanding when I look back at what I've overcome. And I thought at the time it was just really a crappy experience. But now I can look at it as how it helped me build certain skills that are transferable. I can do this as a leader, not just about me being in legal. I can use these skills as leadership development. And then how I can start to teach that, which is how we're all educators. So I've used a lot of my experiences and me making sense of my lived experience to now teach. So the strategies for flourishing, I have a sense of what's worked for me, what I've observed in the field, hearing the stories of others. But I also am co-learning and open to hearing what works for others because I just recognize that my journey is specific to me and unique to me, but there's learning opportunities in the stories that are shared by others.
I love how you frame that, Whitney, talking about that co-learning and how we continue to learn from each other, on this journey, even when they're parallel paths and very unique to us, being, uniquely situated human beings. But understanding that, our careers evolve similarly like we do as people, right, as human beings. And so we're kind of really thinking about what that transition looks like, going from figuring out, identifying ourselves, putting a finger on our identity and what that means for the evolution of our roles within a team, right? So I'm kind of wondering, I want to, ask some interesting questions here on the evolution of, legal professionals in general. And how do we really how do you see the legal professional role really evolving beyond the traditional boundaries that we've had established up until this point?
That's such a great question, Kelly. And I know this because we've all been immersed in this and watching it in real time. It's really an exciting time to be a legal professional. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people moving away from this conventional structure that we've seen in legal practice and really starting to make the law their own in terms of design, getting back to the design of it all. And so I've seen an increase in freelance paralegals, contract paralegals, same with attorneys. My state, Arizona, we have licensed paraprofessionals. So, it allows people to start really assisting and getting legal services met across the board so that people that might have limited income or just can't afford to hire a big law firm, they can still have access to justice. And so I'm really seeing the increase of freelance and contract support that helps alleviate bottlenecks, that helps alleviate some of the burnout that we're seeing with small and solo practitioners as they're growing and scaling. So having that ability to have someone jump in so they can focus on growth, they can focus on the AI integration, that's been a tremendous support. Also seeing this social media being a catalyst for transformation, change management. I'm really seeing a lot of, whether you're a 9 to 5er, whether you're an entrepreneur, but seeing this entrepreneurial mindset where we're connecting through social media. We're really advocating for change. We're networking. We're providing support. We're providing collaboration opportunities. We're providing resources. I love that about Christine and Kelly. Both of you, you share resources. If a new article comes out or there's a new executive order, we're all sharing this in real time versus the gatekeeping that we've seen done traditionally or historically. So it's really this cutting edge time of information share, think tanks, and freeing up space by getting the work done still in efficient ways so that we can be more strategic and optimizing our performance structures.
Yeah, it's as if, that silo effect is no longer, we've realized it's no longer serving us, and it's no longer serving the communities that, we want to deliver legal services and support to. So it's really interesting seeing that, evolution of the professionals within this space evolving with our modern digital times. And so with that, I'm curious, where do you see technology and data literacy really showing up in our day-to-day operations, and how does that plug into the design of the work that we're actually doing?
Absolutely. I feel really encouraged in seeing AI show up with AI assistive tools. So people literally using AI to assist in drafting, to assist with legal research. There had been a chilling effect and a lot of fears around, how do we really start to adapt this and use this ethically and responsibly? I'm encouraged to see CLEs that are discussing this, seeing, people try to get ahead of this and really inform practitioners that it's okay to take risk and to use this, but to always have that human judgment element, which is what we've talked about, and I know we've written articles about that human judgment piece. But the day to day is there. There's so many tools available. I always just encourage people to use at least one, try one. You can see what works, see what doesn't work. And rather than just giving up the use of it, you can provide feedback to that vendor, to their platform. You can help them because they don't know the legal space the way that we do. So that's where the design really comes into play. You have multiple stakeholders. We're the users. And so we can really have this collaboration where we're providing in real time how our experience has been. And that's feedback to the vendors. They want this information. They'll always set up a meeting to do that with us and to go over questions we have, what's not working, any updates on their side. And that's how we can collaborate in the design space. So the drafting, legal research, I'd say are major ones. Also, these analytical dashboards or dashboards that provide the analytics. And for me, I do plaintiff's personal injury law, but this can be really in any space. So just the ability to pull up your case in a given platform and see, if it's an insurance case, what the insurance policy limits are, the notes that we've had with the client, all of the pleadings, all of the phone calls, all of the correspondence saved in. So you have this one portal, you have this one central space for all of the client related, file related materials. So even with that, and these have expenses and it varies from firm to firm, but there's something that people can reach out to start utilizing the support of AI or, generative AI to assist even in communications. If you're wanting to communicate to a colleague and it might be some tension there or some stress there, you can take that part out by outsourcing it to AI, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever your preference is, and say, how do I say this in a warmer way? How do I say this in a firmer way? If you're trying to advocate for yourself or for advancement opportunities or compensation. So you can really take out some of that stress by utilizing AI in your day-to-day processes.
Yeah, I love how are sort of framing this as, paralegals being these sort of connectors, right? We're really casting our net out there to really pull in everyone. We're very inclusive in what we want to do, which is kind of what you were touching on with the vendors, that we work with, and the legal tech providers. They want to know, where our pain points are, and what solutions that we can come up with in order to help us all thrive in this space, right? So what do you feel differentiates, a legal professional who may feel like they're thriving versus a legal professional who really feels stuck in, maybe the analog times, or, those that look like they're thriving as opposed to those that feel stuck?
Definitely. One central theme I'm seeing is that advocacy piece of speaking up. And I know that can feel very uncomfortable. I've been there myself as an introverted attorney. I've been in rooms where my voice kind of, was lessened. I felt intimidated. I felt like I couldn't really contribute to anything that was being said and done. And honestly, I just felt like I didn't have a unique perspective. I really didn't think I was creative at all for many years. And over time, I realized that one of my greatest advantages as an introverted professional was to have those one on one conversations. And I could share what my thoughts were. I had that psychological safety to really give input. And once I had confidence in those one on one conversations with other attorneys, with paralegals, with the firm administrator, I realized I did add value. I just needed a space to really kind of land on my ideas, to brainstorm, and to get encouragement that, hey, that's a great point. You should bring that higher. You should stay with that journey. You should stay on that path. So really having the opportunity to have a space where someone can hear your ideas and support you, I think that's helpful for taking ownership over your voice. And once that confidence is built, those are the paralegals, the support staff, the legal professionals that I really see thriving because they have confidence in a professional way, right? We're not being argumentative, we're not rocking the boat unnecessarily, and we're choosing our battles. But when I feel passionate about something and I'm informed on it, and I understand I'm going to own the solution versus just bringing a problem, now I have confidence in how I want to be strategic in raising awareness and seeing this through. So it is strategic in the way that you advocate for yourself or a cause, but it just takes having mentorship and psychological safety to do so.
That's interesting that you bring up psychological safety because that was a topic that we covered in our, I think, two-part article series where we talked about agency. We talked about self-advocacy and just that, right? Having this confidence. And I think this psychological safety that you're speaking of really goes back to the culture, the office culture and where we work, right? And that was one of the, I think, key pillars that we addressed is making sure that we who are in leadership consider the type of culture and environment that we are creating and perpetuating. And I think that was probably the catalyst to the next series of articles that we wrote specifically on coaching and how to use the coaching framework within our classrooms. Because as you identified, we're all educators, right? We have influence on the next gen of legal professionals. And, interestingly, I had my technically my last class for my federal court practice and procedures class for at the community college where I teach. But I actually, because I've been teaching for almost a decade now, my students, I don't know about you, Kelly and Whitney, but I have office hours and they're online. And I usually come in early, like 15 minutes early before class, and I'll stay. I commit to staying at least 15 minutes after class for office hours. Sometimes after class, I've stayed as long as an hour to an hour and a half for office hours, speaking with students. And you know what? Those conversations do not even revolve around the coursework materials. It definitely revolves around competence and confidence. They are scared because they are seeing all of these job descriptions that say they need at least 1 to 2 to 3 years of experience for entry level roles. They have zero. So they're trying to overcome that barrier and hurdle to, come into the workforce. And then they also don't have hands-on experience, right? Which is required, for most lawyers that want to work with legal professionals. They want them to have some sort of on the job experience. Just kind of touching back on that coaching framework that we encourage, in within a law firm or legal environment. How would you say that coaching supports this kind of professional growth in legal environments that we aspirationally, here three, we strive for?
Such good question, Christine. And I love that you talked about these valuable conversations that we're having offline or outside of the group with one-on-one with other students, because that really is, those are the gems. That's what we really learn, the pain points and what's plaguing them, because they have that safety to do so. So you know, for coaching, I think the big thing, and I know we've talked about this before, probably in our last podcast episode, and it probably sounds redundant, but I'm going to say it again. It really initially fosters that space for self reflection. And a lot of us as professionals, we just don't take the time. And you don't need a great deal of time. You just need a little bit of time to think about, first of all, what's bothering me today? What's at the top of my mind that is distracting me from what I need to do? Chances are it's something new to us. We have a lot of fears. We have imposter syndrome around it. We just don't know how to get started. We're overwhelmed. And if that one thing, we could just get started on it or get it off our plate, then we could really excel. We could really do so many different things. And so coaching gives space for reflection and self-awareness, where I can take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 minutes and think about, what is it that's bothering me? What support could benefit me right now? Who's one person that I can think of at the top of my brain immediately that comes up to the top of my brain of who I should reach out to that could potentially help me? And when you just give yourself a little bit of space to quiet the mental clutter and the mental external noise, then you can really see more clearly. And so that time that we spend might feel like it's a waste of time, but it gives us time back. And so I always try to integrate in reflection prompts, with students. I always try to get them to explain the why. So even if they're thinking about something and they're caught on, I want to come up with the correct answer, that's not just the focus. The focus isn't just the right answer, because we know, as of us doing this for many years, that sometimes you don't know the right answer. You have to be comfortable in the ambiguity. And so I will encourage students to sit with the ambiguity for a period of time. Maybe it's 90 seconds, maybe it's a day, but to sit with it for a second, because that is real life experience. So, to the extent with coaching, it's really trying to infuse in role playing, real life scenarios, debriefing, hypotheticals, how you would handle something, and infusing that in and letting people have the space to noodle on it for various amounts of times. Sometimes we have longer, but sometimes it is 60 seconds. You have 60 seconds to make a decision. What would you do? Sit with it for a second and now take a breath and go. What's your thought? And I think that gives people the freedom to have trial and error. And that's really what the coaching space is for. Try something. We want to encourage risk-taking behavior in a safe container and give feedback in the process.
That is so interesting, because I always tell my students, lawyers are trained to be risk averse, right? They're trained to mitigate the risk. So I really appreciate that you're bringing this forward, and sitting with that ambiguity. That is really, and in other words, what I say to my students is, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? It's going to happen. It's part of the process. It is absolutely part of the process. And I do appreciate that, Whitney, again, like I said, with regard to this, how you encourage students to noodle on things, right? And for various time periods. I think that is really an outstanding coaching practice. And just kind of coming back to this kind of coaching environment that we're trying to instill in the classroom, how do you think educators can begin to introduce these kind of coaching principles early in their courses?
Definitely. One thing that I've personally started adopting, I've gone fully online with my teaching. I used to do hybrid. And so being fully online, there is this autonomy that my students now have. And so I've noticed that there is a greater level of accountability. If they miss an assignment, they reach out to me. They still might ask if there's an opportunity to make up their points, but they will often acknowledge that it was written in the syllabus. They saw that they made a mistake. And so there's this inherent accountability that comes with the autonomy of being online. So I found that to be very helpful. And in the coaching space, there is that nature of that, of allowing people to have freedom, but also recognizing there's not a lot of leeway or gratitude, or not gratitude, latitude, because you're in this space, which is a privilege, right? It's a privilege to be remote, hybrid, or be fully online. So we want to be fair to others that are in the same space. So that's part of my structure, is that. But I also really encourage people that if they have questions, if they want to schedule a meeting with me, let's be proactive. What's the agenda? What is it that you want to approach and tackle? It's not just a meeting where you have me there and I'm there just anticipating what you might need. You have to come prepared with what it is that you would like to focus on. That's not just for me and my time and space and energy conservation, but it's really for students, for them to start thinking critically, and also the advocacy piece. So what is it you need support with? What is it that you want to hone in on? What's the best utilization of our 15, 20, 30 minutes together? And whenever I have that approach versus just leaving it open, I've noticed it's much more focused. Students come in prepared. A lot of times they have insights and they answer their own questions in the first 10 minutes. So it's just
Mhm.
creating the space of, I'm here, you focused in on what you want to focus in on. You come to the meeting, a lot of times you answer half of it, and whatever you can't resolve, I'm truly here now as a support. So it encourages the independence, the accountability for yourself, but you're still not left hanging. I am here to support, I'm here to provide guidance, but not to usurp your judgment. I want you to start to formulate your judgment, and I want you to start to formulate that experience of seeking help, seeking guidance, and knowing pointedly how you want to tackle it. What's my question? Just having a clear question is a lifesaver. It's an invaluable skill that's transferable, no matter whether you're a student or whether you're a professional or whether you're a teacher. Whatever your role is, having a clear approach to the questions you're asking is well served to anyone.
Yeah, but, it's so interesting looking at how we, apply that sort of coaching framework within the classroom setting, whether we're in person live, whether it's asynchronous or online live classes. And I've really found that if I provide some structure to my open office hours, that really helps to sort of lay the groundwork for the students to feel like it's psychologically a safe space. So, for instance, I will typically schedule a small demo or something with some legal technology that's peripheral to the work we're doing, and so that for 10 minutes or so within that the capsule of the office hours, we are focusing on something together as a group. And then what happens after that is this really open forum, this transparent discussion points where it becomes retaining, it's a retainer for information and data and reflection. I love how you bring that reflection piece into it, because I really think that that's what makes it actionable for us as educators, right? Really seeing how these, practice exercises help to emphasize the need for these skills, these durable skills, transferable skills within the legal space. And so when we're talking about making it actionable, what are the implications of this when it comes to legal education? Where do you see, Whitney, where do you see those gaps between the actual education of something, learning something, and the actual practical application of it in the legal space?
Thanks, Kelly. And to clarify, are you thinking of the gaps in skills, or is it more skills related?
Well, I think maybe from the perspective of the learner, right? Where we might be providing them with the knowledge, but they don't know how to apply that knowledge in practice. And so, what gaps do you see between that? So, yeah, really the skill acquisition and then the application of the skill.
Definitely. And so I know I mentioned earlier the imposter syndrome. I really do think, and I know imposter syndrome gets used a lot, but we just can't ignore it because it's a very real experience, especially for professionals if they're first generation, or just haven't really, ever been in a role like this. There's social backgrounds, things that really can, create a great deal of fear in someone of making a mistake. And so we want to look at how can we speak to the experiences of a variety of students, a variety of backgrounds. And one thing is to really, I think this is something that's worked well for me in the application and really in the teaching space, is how can I alleviate some of the stress of learning? So for me, sometimes in my teaching, I laugh at myself if I make a mistake. I acknowledge the mistake. I try to be a little lighthearted. I crack jokes sometimes. That's my personality. So I don't encourage it if it's not something that you enjoy doing or it's not natural to you. But find your space, find your thing to where your students can see you being a human. And I really do think there's the embodiment of it. So sometimes we are expecting things to translate to our students and they're picking up on how we're presenting. So if I'm saying it's okay if you make a mistake, yet I'm always polished, I never make a mistake, or if I make a mistake, I'm embarrassed, or I make it seem like it's a problem, then that's really what my students are learning. But if they see me make a mistake, and they did when I recorded last summer for ASU, I recorded all my lectures ahead of time. So I try to make it perfect. I have my teleprompter. There's still times when I flubbed a line and I just kind of smiled and laughed, and I didn't want to re-record at that point. It was, my eighth time or take of the day. And I said, this part I can live with, it's going to stay in. And I moved forward. And so it's in there. So my students, even though they don't have access to me in real time, they can see over the several 14, 15 lectures that, I wasn't perfect. I did my best, but at the end of the day, we got it done. They understood the content they learned. And I think that encourages them that I can make a mistake. I don't have to be perfect. There's that relatability. There's that human factor. And I always try to really infuse that in. I think that really does go a long way with the application, where people can feel like, I might not get it right, but I want to just throw this idea out here, or I feel strongly about this. You took off points for this assignment, but I really would like to see, do you have the rubric? Do you have a rubric to show me where I missed points? And I appreciate that from students. So it's them also feeling like there's transparency in the process of them knowing that this just wasn't a unfair approach. They're invested in the process. So I think it's twofold of the human centric element of showing my humanity, but also when they come back to me, I'm not defensive. I try to lower my defenses because it's easy to do that too as an educator, saying, no, I did it correctly. But I've had students reach out and have questions, and I've recognized, oh, I didn't really clearly note that in the assignment. So for next semester, I want to change the language around that assignment. That is confusing. And now I can step back and acknowledge that because of feedback from my students. So I think when they see that you take in their their knowledge and their input, and that you're not perfect, it allows people to be imperfect. And I think that helps overcome the imposter syndrome.
It really sounds like you humanize the whole process, right? Not just of the learning process, but also the work we're doing in the legal space and preparing our students, to really be agile within the space. One of the things I like to add, for I have an exercise that's a billing and timekeeping exercise that I have the students do for 2 different days within their week, and then do a reflection on that. And recently, I've added this sort of energy component to it. So it's not just a time log, a billing and timekeeping log, it's a time and energy log so that they can see where capacity can be, really pulled from us, or where we need to have a lot of energy for a specific task. And I feel like, those types of exercises where we're sort of embedding these, technology, data literacy, but also human capacity into the activity, is really helping to create that psychologically safe space, like you said, to allow for dialogue, to allow for feedback. And that's where I'm seeing a lot of change within the retention of information and of knowledge, is that I'm co-learning. Like you said earlier, Whitney, this is a co-learning space. And as educators, if we're so rigid and only saying like my way is the right way, and I've always done it this way, but there's loss of opportunity for the learners to see that agility is actually critical to success in this space. So, as an educator, what would you recommend as incorporating into our curriculum that could better prepare students for that career agency, right? Not just finding a job and being placed in a role, but actually having agency over that trajectory of their career?
Definitely. Something, as soon as you were talking, Kelly, what popped up into my mind was this resiliency piece. And I don't mean to, make this so high level. I'm going to ground it as well. But resiliency is something that we just classically, we don't see it taught in the classroom. And like you said, it gets back to our capacity. So if I'm in a dip, if I'm going through life circumstances, if I'm going through a really challenging time in life, an experience or an assignment or a task or a project that ordinarily I'd be able to get through relatively easily and timely, it's taking me forever. I'm second guessing myself. I'm not seeing my way out of this. I'm spending a lot of hours on it. And it comes down to I'm just in a dip right now. And I think there's that acknowledgement of noticing when you're in a dip and having some relaxation around your expectations. So it is a capacity management thing. If I didn't sleep well last night and I'm trying to tackle all these things, acknowledging that maybe yesterday wasn't my best day to perform. We're into a new day today, and I'm going to approach it from a refreshed perspective today because I recognize that I slept better and I feel better, right? So I'm not personalizing it. I'm not carrying it through the week. So a lot of times with resiliency, it's catching not just transitions over time and how we've handled it, but day to day. How can we start looking at our resiliency day to day? And I'll tell you, I'm doing that right now through my Aura Ring. My Aura Ring tells me what my resilience is for the day. If it's adequate or fair, I forget the different categories, but it's telling me if, based on the data that it has for me, if this is a day that I have great readiness for the day, ready to tackle the day, or if I need to infuse in more breaks because I'm actually not at my optimal readiness for the day. So having that data is very helpful. And so I know, and I think I've lost sight of the question you even asked me originally, but resiliency wanted to pop in there and take the stage.
No, I think it's super important because, like you said, and like all three of us have kind of mentioned, I think even the underlying tone here is that it's lifelong learning here, right? And when we have tools, whether, innovations, technology, whatever it might be, to actually glean some insights into how we can operate, improve operations even within ourselves, I think it's important as educators to share that with the learners in the space, in our network, in our classrooms. So really, I appreciate how, you offer this lens of lived experience, right? You're not just throwing this technology out to the students saying, oh, try this or try that. You've tried it yourself, and that's where that sort of safe space for failing, right? Failing forward, right? We have so much valuable feedback from trying something and failing at it. And so I really appreciate how you're you're teaching with reflection as part of it, but not just because you want the students to be able to apply it. It's because you're applying it yourself, right? So we're really integrating some of those tools responsibly into our assignments and exercises because we've found value in it. So I think, it's really interesting for you to be talking about how we're preparing, the future workforce based on what we're actually experiencing right now. So, what do you feel is maybe one of the best activities that you have implemented to creating opportunities for students to feel like their voice has value and that they can, aspire to roles of leadership within whatever environment they're seeking?
Definitely. So discussion boards, especially being online with my class, I've really had to utilize discussion boards to not only make sure students are understanding the concepts and they're applying it, but also having that peer feedback. I think has been very helpful. It's instilled confidence in the students. It's also really started exposing students to relationship management, of being able to agree respectfully or disagree respectfully, and also to not just say I agree or I disagree, but to also find support and them having a voice. So just say, not just, they don't get credit if they just say I agree or a great post. They get full credit when they also contribute to the conversation. So I think that's been very helpful for them to see themselves with agency, to see themselves, to have this identity as professionals early, even in a business law program, to start saying, this is how I see myself. I'm contributing. I'm an individual contributor at a minimum, right? That's a leader as well. And then also, something else I've incorporated is this case analysis assignment that I do in my class. I teach on corporate responsibility, corporate compliance, transparency, those sorts of topics. And so I have my students look at corporations in real time, look at their public facing documents and look at maybe a potential scandal or something in the news related to transparency with that company, and to give an analysis in 2 pages. So it's a 2-page analysis. So it's forcing them to be reflexive in their critical thinking, to be succinct. So it might take some time to get there, but you have to cut back, have a structure, and to be able to articulate what the issue is and how you would advise the company to try to get out of the difficult circumstance from a public relations standpoint. And they've had a lot of fun in that assignment. I've noticed students really spending a lot of detail, them really taking on this sense of, I'm an executive, here's how I would advise them. It's been a lot of fun for them. And a lot of them haven't even had their first job, but to have that experience of being able to inform a phantom, well, it's an actual company, but a phantom informing of a company, it's given them a lot of confidence. And I've seen them take a lot of pride in that assignment. So that's been really exciting to see and watch.
I am taking notes here, Whitney. I think that is a fantastic assignment. I think I might have to co-opt that for my class as well, an introduction to law, because I always am curious. Kelly brought it up earlier when we talk about skill acquisition and then the application of those skills. And that's where we're seeing deficits and gaps, where the students don't have an opportunity to practice in a safe space, like a sandbox, right? And that's what we're hoping to have in our classroom design, is that we have the opportunity opportunity for the students to practice in a safe space. And so I really think that's aligned. That specific assignment that you talked about, that case analysis assignment, I think that's super aligned with that kind of psychological safety, the building of the professional identity, giving them opportunity to practice and encouraging agency. I think that is excellent. And I'm wondering too, though, because you mentioned your first generation students, and I deal quite a bit with that now that I'm teaching at the community college, and I myself, right? I'm first generation born here from my parents. And I think about when you say maybe they haven't had the opportunity to be in a professional role where all of these expectations and, decorum and professionalism are expected of them, but are not necessarily given an opportunity during their training to practice that. So, what you were saying earlier with relationship building and connecting with folks, I think this is where it is imperative that the students start doing outreach into the community, joining associations, finding mentors, finding opportunities where they can step out and practice these skills. And so I'm wondering, Whitney, what are your thoughts on how we as educators can help our students see themselves as professionals earlier, right? Because they don't necessarily have that opportunity within, if they're not in an internship or they don't have an opportunity to practice that.
Definitely. Christine, I would say it's a continuum or a spectrum because, depending on your teaching and your resources, you might not have space to help with all of these. But the first thing I was thinking of was networking. So if there's networking opportunities, sharing community or school related events, with students, mostly even school related. A lot of times my students have come up to me and asked me, what do you think? I'm trying to get a job, or, what are your thoughts about what I could do? What could be a next step of a group that I join? And I didn't know at the time, but I said, let me reach out to some of my colleagues and find out what might be available because I was a new adjunct at the time. And, I reached out to a fellow colleague to find out what groups they were recommending for their students that they could join or that might be advantageous. So it was some education on my side, but even that of, making yourself a resource. I've had students after we finished class, I've never offered my LinkedIn or anything to students, but I've had students that proactively found me on LinkedIn after our class concluded. I always accept those. So they've just wanted to stay connected that way. I've had students reach out, ask me if I could be a referral or recommend them to law school. And I have rules and parameters around that. Obviously, I don't just give that out to any student. And I communicate that early on in my syllabus in the class. But there are times where we can even make ourselves available in that regard of resources to get entry into a program. If we know someone, we can forge connections and introductions. It's a quick email for us. I know we're busy, but that's something I try to make space for and try to make myself available. I've done executive speed networking with community organizations and, things like that. Or I put it on my socials and I'll share that as freebies and free resources for students that might not want to pay to go to an event, but here's an event, I'll already be there, one person, and it's open, it's free, or it's a discount for students. So I try to be mindful and share those opportunities as they arise, because that really gives them the space and opportunity to build and forge relationships and network, which we know is so important for those aligned opportunities.
That's wonderful. I just did that in class last night too, where I said, hey, the San Diego Paralegal Association is going to have their June Paralegal Night. I know we're done with class, but I'll be there and I hope to see you there. And, even some of the opportunities that I've provided in my classroom include, extra credit opportunities for attending even virtual programs through associations, because I want them and I'm encouraging them to start getting out there. And do you have any kind of techniques that you can share with us on how you move some of the more passive learners to become more active participants?
Oh, that's such a good question. Especially in the online space, I feel like I've been online for a year now, so I'm really going to utilize the summer to reflect on what's working, what's where I can pivot. But I think that something that's been helpful is my feedback. So even with the discussion boards, I'm not always able to give paragraphs on paragraphs of feedback, as we're going through 15 weeks. So I do try to have balance there. But when I do provide feedback, I really try to be unique and specific to that person. I have 60 students, usually around 60 enrolled in my online course. So I try to be specific, tailored to what they contributed. And I found that that really has been helpful. They feel seen, they feel like they now have a sense of what their strengths are versus just saying good job or great job. Sometimes it is just great job, it just depends on the grading cycles. But I try to have at least a few times during the semester where I really give detailed feedback that speaks specifically to what that person contributed. And I think that just instills this early onset of recognizing their unique, their gifts, their talents, where you don't have to be in the same lane as anyone else. Let's speak to what really resonates with you. That's what really helped you shine. That was helpful for visibility. And you might be onto something. The fact that you really took to that specific topic, you might think it's accidental at the time or it was easiest because the deadline was approaching, but you spent the most amount of time on it. So that can be a signal to you for future work or for future exploration of something that you might be passionate about or you might have interest in, at least to explore further.
Really building on that curiosity mindset, right? And that how, we're going into this legal landscape to explore where you're going to flourish and, really emphasizing that again, this you are the architect of your career, right? And so I'm wondering, Whitney, if we have an educator listening right now and they're looking to evolve their program, take it to the next level, where would you recommend they start?
Ooh, such a good question. Something that I've really, even when I was still hybrid, that was really working well, and my students started giving feedback on it. They like these rip from the headlines conversations. They like media. They want media incorporated into teaching. And a lot of them go to the media for news, social media, they're heavily involved in. So if we're just teaching with these dense books, even if they're ebooks, a lot of the students are not reading that. So I've assigned some YouTube videos sometimes. I sprinkle it throughout, but it's a recognition that I need to meet them where they're at. They like the media component. They like real life experiences that helps ground them in the conversation. So I try to be mindful of current events and sprinkle that throughout the program. It's comfortable for us to stick with our PowerPoints and the way we've done it from semester to semester, but even just taking three conversations throughout the semester and saying, what's a real life example of this right now? And finding a news article and opening up lecture with, hey, wanted to bring this to your attention. Look at what this university did, or look at what this school is doing, and make it relatable to them. Because if it's all work-based or all, yeah, for me, I teach undergrad. So a lot of them haven't had their first jobs or they're working in entry-level positions. They haven't had a full corporate or professional role. So I will ground it in even education and say, look at what this university's policy is. What do you think about that? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? And it makes them feel like they have a say in it. They understand the issue. It's exciting. It's grounded in real life events. And then I can extrapolate that to whatever our conversation or discussion point is for that day.
Thank you so much, Whitney, for this amazing discussion. It was great to chat with you about, our teaching techniques and how we embed coaching framework into our coursework. And of course, this ever present and ever evolving technology and AI and Gen AI in our workflows. But I really appreciated, this dialogue about how do we create opportunities for the students to have a voice, to exercise that, right? And to really develop future leaders, and I think that's really where the three of us resonate deeply. Right. We have a lot of faith that the people that are in our spheres of influence are going to be those movers and shakers in the world. Right. And so, as you know, Kelly and I love a good case study. So I love that rip from the headlines. I love using these things in my classroom too. As you know, Kelly and I do have a lightning round in our podcast. And I just wanted to actually make it a shortened lightning round and have you finish the sentence. And so this is what I would love for you to finish. The future of the paralegal profession depends on.
AI literacy and human judgment.
I love it.
Mhm. Wow. So
Mm.
relevant and poignant. So, Whitney, thank you so much today. This conversation has been really insightful, but it also reminds us that preparing paralegals for the future is not just about those tools or tasks. It's about helping them really understand who they are, how they think, and how valuable their contributions are to the delivery of legal services. And as Christine often says, you cannot AI the human out of humanity. And that is exactly where professional identity and career agency absolutely live. So I just want to say thank you all for joining us today on Legal Luminaries, the Paralegal Edition. Until next time, let's keep building intentional, human centered pathways in our classrooms and in our profession, and keep shining your light in the profession and beyond. A special thank you to Doug Lusk and the National Society for Legal Technology for their continued support.